Hello, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our CAWASA Wednesday webinar. Today, we're going to be discussing the history of source water protection in Ontario, Canada. We have a special guest with us this afternoon, and we'd like to thank Valerie Jenkinson and the Operators Without Borders for finding our guest speaker today. He's the development and manager of hydrogeology with Crozier Consulting Engineers in Ontario, Canada. He has over 25-year career, has focused on municipal and communal water supply projects for private clients, municipalities, and First Nation communities, Ontario. He is a licensed well technician, a former contractor, and currently sits on 3 province of Ontario source water protection committees which develop policies to protect sources of municipal water supplies, both groundwater and surface water. So I'd now invite Mr. Chris Gerrits, M.Sc, professional engineer, to present to us this afternoon. Thank you for joining us, Chris.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure. Anytime I can talk to a group of people that are, first of all, interested in what I'm saying is good. But yeah, with the interest in water supply, it's always a pleasure. So I'll just share my screen if you can let me know when you can see it. You see that?
Yeah, you'd need to put it into
Yeah,
presentation mode.
presentation
Yeah,
mode.
right, great.
Is it there? Oh, there we go. Okay, we're all
Uh,
good.
you, you're not quite there as yet.
No? What do you see? Oh, it should. Oh, okay, just 1 second.
Yeah.
Uh, got too many screens here. That should be good. As soon as I click share. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
we're there
great.
now. Great, brilliant.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me. I'm Chris. I'm going to talk to you about a history of source water protection in Ontario. Um, like as was mentioned, I've got a career as an engineer and a number of years as a contractor. So the family business was in water well construction. After I did a couple degrees in engineering, I spent some time in consulting, then about 15 years constructing municipal wells, and then since 2019, I've been back in the engineering consulting side of things. So we'll go through a history, and then I do have an example of a project that we completed recently, developing a new source water protection plan for a First Nation community in Ontario. So let's see. There we go. So I work for Crozier Consulting. We're an Ontario-based consulting firm in works primarily in land development. So we work mostly for private clients, a little bit of municipal work. So first, I just thought it would be good to show everybody, in case you weren't aware, where Ontario is. So you can see on the map, we're in the center of Canada. We're the southernmost province. We have about 1 million square kilometers of total area. Oops. Um, Population of about 14 million, densely populated in the south, and we're heavily into manufacturing, mining, and agriculture. So what is source water protection? It's a multi-barrier approach to make sure that we have clean drinking water for all Ontarians. The program was developed by the government of Ontario about 25 years ago, and it resulted in science-based assessment reports. And um, so pre-2000, there were no source water protection policies in place. There was a loosely defined regulatory framework. Um, oh, for some reason, it's timing my slides. I don't know. how to stop that. Um, so many decisions with respect to operation and maintenance came down to financial decisions at the local levels. Operators didn't have consistent training. I'm so sorry. And there was a regulation to outline safe well construction requirements. So in May 2000, there was a serious outbreak of Campylobacter in Walkerton. It resulted in 7 deaths and 2,300 getting sick, and a resulting inquiry provided 121 recommendations. So included in that was the concept of protecting sources and a recommendation to develop source protection plans for each watershed in the province. So a multi-barrier approach looks at source water protection, water treatment system, inspection, testing, the distribution system, and the provision of drinking water. So first up, source water protection. We consider a source to be any untreated surface water from lakes or rivers and groundwater aquifers that supply drinking water. Drinking water sources that can be easily contaminated from activities. Long-term problems can develop that are costly or impossible to correct, and source protection is about protecting sources from both contamination and depletion so that we can ensure a long-term supply of clean water. So there were 19 source protection regions developed with multi-stakeholder committees. The committees were comprised of business, public, municipal, and Indigenous members, and so far 38 local source protection plans have been developed. So next in the multi-barrier approach is water treatment. So all source water must be treated so that harmful contaminants and organisms are reduced or removed. Different water sources require different treatment processes. All municipal drinking water systems must have disinfection at a minimum. Most widely here is chlorine, because it's low cost and powerful, and all water systems must provide a minimum level of treatment. Distributed water must contain a residual, and effective treatment must be monitored. On top of that, the Government of Ontario carries out inspections of municipal residential drinking water systems as per the Safe Drinking Water Act. As I said before, different water sources require different treatment processes. Compliance and enforcement is the responsibility of the municipality or the system owner. There's inspections annually. At least 1 out of every 3 is unannounced. All laboratories that do the testing are inspected twice a year. Once is unannounced of those 2 inspections. And they report requests for public for investigation of contravention of the Safe Drinking Water Act. So each system is assigned a rating, and the systems usually achieve quite successfully high ratings. So testing is completed by operators. They test the residential drinking water system. If a test shows that there's any problems, they apply corrective action. There's thousands of drinking water samples collected every year, tested at provincially licensed laboratories for microbiological organisms and chemical substances. If they aren't meeting the standards, they're usually, they adjust the treatment system, and then they have to confirm that it's working through subsequent testing. The distribution systems, it's the pipes, pumping stations, etc. We have to ensure that disinfection is at the residential property line. Systems that are poorly maintained can become contaminated. And system owners are required to maintain a consistent level of disinfection throughout the system. Testing is conducted within the distribution system to check the disinfection level. More than 80% of the Ontario's population receives drinking water from a municipal drinking water system. Municipalities own their own or have water delivered from an adjacent municipal system. And to ensure a consistent approach, the province has a water quality management standard that have been developed. We also have two different types of non-municipal water systems, non-municipal year-round residential and designated facilities. And we have separate regulations about the maintenance and ownership of systems. So the successes of the multivariate approach, since 2004, more than 99% of the drinking water system tests have met the standards. We have a successful A ranking in EcoJustice's drinking water report. There are 19 source protection committees that have developed 38 plans. We've determined 22 drinking water threats. We develop risk management plans to address those threats. A big part is education. So we have road signs installed on highways to identify vulnerable areas around drinking water systems. So the province has what they call the Source Protection Information Atlas. So you can go onto the internet and type in your property address and see what kind of policies apply. So, for example, I entered an address here, which is where the circle is. Over here, it tells you all the policies that would apply. And in this case, it gives you the wellhead protection area name and the risk rating. In this area, there's a problem with sodium and chloride in the water. It's a groundwater recharge area. So then you can go to the policy and figure out what that actually means for your property. So we did a work project on Beausoleil First Nation, which is a Indigenous community in Ontario, and it was actually on an island, and we were retained to develop a source protection plan for them. So this is a picture of the island. It has a very small property here, 3 islands. The only inhabited island is Christian Island. So it's located in the Severn Sound watershed within the Greater Georgian Bay watershed. So that's the source protection area is the South Georgian Bay Lake Simcoe source protection area. So it was a very small population. There's only 679 people there, 221 private dwellings. They have a septic disposal area for their wastewater, and they have some contaminated sites, Hope Island, which had an old lighthouse on it. So it's primarily sandy area with some granite drainage. They drain internally to these ponds, and there are some steep cliff edges on the west side. So their water is from the surface water. There's an intake 250 meters offshore. They built a water treatment plant in 1999 with 2 reservoirs, a chlorination system, a treatment system, and they do occasionally have exceedances in water quality for aluminum, iron, and dissolved organic compounds. So no health-related exceedances. On the mainland portion, they have a small groundwater-based system with 2 granite bedrock wells. They did recommend previously that the system be abandoned, and those were replaced. So as part of the source protection plan, we had to identify potential sources of contamination. So we identified some landfill and waste sites. fuel storage and oil spray areas, some septic systems, and then others would be salt storage and salt application because we get snow here and we put salt on the roads, refueling at the docks, some shipwreck areas, and recreation areas. So then we have to assign a vulnerability score of the system to determine what is how vulnerable an activity is or an area is to contamination. So you have wellhead protection areas around the wells, and you also have intake protection zones around surface water intakes. In this one, what is different is since this is an indigenous community, we incorporated traditional knowledge into the source protection plan. So we identified areas that had meaning to them for historical purposes, whether it's medicine gathering or areas where they had ceremonies related to water. So typical areas would be burial grounds, gathering areas for medicine, sacred spots, fishing grounds, community gathering places, and ceremonial sites. So here we see some of the traditional significance areas mapped out on the map. So then the next stage is to implement a source water protection plan. So the goal is to produce a watershed assessment that ranks the risks, identify actions to reduce those risks, develop an implementation strategy to deliver on the actions, and this one is meant to be specific to the First Nations. So the purpose of the implementation plan is to facilitate understanding of on-reserve source water protection planning while encouraging the First Nation to participate. So the whole process is founded on the concept that informed citizens will be most effective advocates for protection. So the source water protection plan working group will oversee the process of developing the plan. It would be a multi-stakeholder process to protect on-reserve drinking sources. Will incorporate traditional knowledge, historical, traditional, and Western science teachings. And the committee will be comprised of members of the local group, as well as some off-reserve scientific members. So the next stage would include figuring out the delineation of the drinking water system. So figure out where all of the components are. Describe the groundwater and surface water systems, inventory and describe the contamination sources, assess the risks, and prioritize the risks in a risk ranking. After that, there'll be a management action plan to reduce and mitigate risks. Acceptable levels will vary by communities and possibly by different members of the working group. Acceptable levels will vary by the members of the community and the working group. And then there will be on and off reserve management actions. So what can and should they do to mitigate the risk? So then next up was an implementation strategy. So who's going to do what, basically, assign roles and responsibilities, a schedule, and assign resources. It'll be important in this situation to have partnerships with the off-reserve community so that that you can make sure that activities happening by your neighbors and adjacent communities aren't impacting your sources and vice versa. And then there's a big monitoring and community outreach program. So education is a big part of it. And this is very important that any source water protection plan is very much a living document and constantly changes. When you have new activities, you need to identify them and update risk management plans and figure out how you're going to control them. So yeah, that was about that on that slide. And then what we're doing now with them, we recommended for next steps in the source water protection process. They're currently forming a working group and they got delayed. They're doing this right now, but they're moving forward to identify and develop the final plan. So that is all for that, and I really apologize for the issues with the slides. I ran through before, and I don't know why they were auto advancing, and I'm not smart enough to figure out how to turn that off. So,
Yeah, well,
yeah,
the tech always
yeah, yeah,
challenges us
yeah.
from time to time.
So really, yeah, at the end of the day, this is a planning tool to help inform decisions on how you're going to advance and how you're going to protect the resources when you have additional development. So it's um, it's really an iterative process. It's also, like I said, a living document. But one of the key things is that it's not really a prohibition on anything. So the goal of source protection isn't to say you can't do this on this property. It's to say, okay, if you're going to do that, what's the risk that's associated with it? And let's develop a risk management plan to mitigate that risk. So yeah, you want to have a gas station, that's fine. But in that area, maybe you need secondary containment so that if there is a spill, it doesn't get into the aquifer. So that's really the main point of it. So it's been 25 years. It's going pretty well. Um, and yeah, if there's any questions, more
Yes,
than
I have
happy
them.
to take them. Yep.
Go
Yes.
ahead, Tom.
Oh, yeah. So I'm trying to find to raise a hand, but I don't see that
Okay.
pop-up
That's
signals.
fine. That's
Anyway,
fine, Tom. Go
good.
ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for the very interesting presentation. I think the slides have been set on an auto timer. So you have to
Yeah,
go
and
set the
I was
auto, you have to go by slide and set the timer off.
yeah, I was looking for it.
And forward by click or something.
Yeah.
Anyway, I have a question though.
Okay.
What one of the first slides showed the statement by a judge that the primary barrier to protection of the soil
Yeah.
is the protection of the source. So what
Yes.
means do you have to protect the source?
Well, it's really the whole plan. So the judge that came, that was after that terrible situation we had where people died as a result of there being no consistent approach to really how we did anything in a water system. So right now, if you wanted to develop a new source of water, uh, you have to go through a prescribed process to get approval for that. So for a new well, you have to do construction and testing, and then you have to go through groundwater modeling to determine where the wellhead protection areas, which are basically the capture zones. So that you have to model um, the areas that uh, based on time of travel. So wellhead protection
Yeah.
area B, for
Okay.
example, is any water falling on the surface there is in the form of precipitation will make it to the
Yeah.
well within 5 years. C is
Okay.
10 years, uh, D is 25. And then
Yeah.
similarly with surface water intakes, it's a different process because things travel a lot faster, but you have to do that same sort of modeling, and then policies are uh, drafted based
Okay.
on that.
Do you install protection zones around a certain
Yeah,
around the well that you cannot have any development?
there's not really, like I said, there's not really a no development zone. The most uh, prohibitive area is 100 meters around a well or a surface
Okay.
water intake, and that's what's called a wellhead protection area A.
Yeah, the
Now,
sanitary
it
zone.
yeah, it doesn't really mean that you can't do anything, uh, but it's all rated to risk. So it's not
Okay.
likely if you wanted to put in a gas station or
Yeah.
an industrial use beside within 100 meters that you would be successable. But
Yeah.
houses are generally fine.
Okay.
So yeah, it's all based on the identified risks.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I was always impressed with the Barbados groundwater protection zoning that was established in 1963, which
Hmm.
actually developed we actually set a no development zone around the major drinking water wells. And actually, if you flew to the country, over the country at night, you could actually see the protection zones because they were dark compared to all the light on the. Of course, Barbados is a small island, so the protection zone have come under pressure. So, but one of the things that they're doing now is that they're putting in a sewer system in the Bell area where people have encroached on the well, but you have to get the wastewater out because you don't want any sewage discharge close to well. And of course we did monitoring of risks. We did actually assessment of the risk with regards to pollution sources that could affect in the aquifer and the stream of the aquifer.
Yeah, and that's so part of it for us, and the reason that it's probably not a prohibition zone around it is because, this was only developed 25 years ago. So in a lot of cases, wells and surface water intakes were already surrounded with development.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but going forward, there's nothing stopping a municipality from through our planning process from saying, no, you can't put that there. So the province doesn't say that you can't, but there is controls through the local municipality to do that. And also, like, so for us, a pipeline shows up on our as a risk. I mentioned there's 22 different threats that the province has listed, and any of those threats you can do a plan for, and you a risk management plan. But even that is not final. We have an emerging issue here now with gravel pits and aggregate pits, and less excavation and more they're being filled up with excess soil from urban areas, and we're caught in this. It's slowly getting resolved, but we're caught in this situation where 25 years ago it wasn't identified as a threat, so there's currently nothing we can do from a source protection point of view to put in safeguards. So we're trying to get it updated, but it's just a good illustration of how everything needs to be a living document, and you need to be able to change and update to meet the current realities.
By the way, your name is Dutch though, Gerrits.
Yeah, don't hold it against me, but yes, it is.
No, I know I'm Dutch too, so I don't hold it against you. But I recognize Dutch name.
Yes, we can get into that, but my grandparents immigrated in 1951 to Canada, so.
They were farmers?
Well, no, my grandfather was a blacksmith, and then when he came to Canada, he became a well driller, and then my dad followed in his footsteps, and then I followed in my dad's footsteps. So
in those days, a lot of farmers immigrated too. Anyway,
yes.
That's off the record. Thank you. Nice meeting you.
Yes. Great.
Any other questions you have? The floor is open, colleagues. Gerrit, sorry, Chris, you mentioned that the source protection really. So do you have a lot of private wells where, I know in some places in North America, they're not serviced by municipal pipelines.
Yeah.
So people have private wells.
Yeah, there's lots. So about 80% of the population are on municipal water supply, and then the rest of the population, which would be about 2.8 million people, are on primarily individual wells. The source protection is really focused on municipal drinking water systems only. The province, and in my opinion, rightfully so, is not really focused on adding too much legislation to private well users. They're required under a separate regulation to maintain their wells in a good state of repair to protect the aquifer. But yeah, currently this is specifically municipal. So if you were a commercial user, or if you were a golf course or something using it for irrigation or agricultural, you don't have to do a source water protection plan.
Yeah. Questions, comments, people? And it is and this planning tool, is it customized for a particular area, or is it replicated in other regions?
Well, the framework is the same across the 19 different source protection areas, but within those areas, there are uh, um, more than one source protection area. So there's 19 source protection areas and there's 38 source protection plans. So because in some areas there's different conditions, so they need a separate plan to deal with those. And that's where it gets really specific to the area. So yeah, the overarching plan framework is the same, but the conditions, the local conditions are reflected in the local plans that are part of the bigger plan. So because Ontario is so large, we have you know, half of the southern half of the province is sort of old glacial outwash, sand and gravel, and the northern and eastern part are like granite, what we call the Canadian Shield. So the conditions are very different. So it's really hard to do one size fits all for these types of plans.
Okay.
And I should mention is that the presentation sort of glossed over it a little bit, but a big part of the source protection plans is also protecting the from overuse. So we have a lot of policies that if you're in a recharge area, where if you're going to do a development, let's say you're going to put in a mall with a parking lot and you're in a significant recharge area, you have to make sure that the amount of the water falling through precipitation on that site is the same after development as before. So you don't want to see a reduction or an increase in runoff. You want the water to be able to infiltrate where it was before, so that we protect the recharge to those aquifers. That is a very big part. And then unique to us, like I said, we have sodium and chloride issues because we use road salt in the winter. So if you can imagine, you're throwing on some salt, and then when the snow melts, it all washes into the local or into the ditches and then into the surface water bodies. So then we start to see problems with sodium and chloride levels increasing in our sources.
Now, so may I add to that statement, to increase recharge and to also prevent runoff, because the urban runoff is also causing a lot of flooding downstream, and a lot of floods that we actually witness now are a cause of that. So recharge from especially parking lots and have permeable surface, so allow the water to get into the aquifer is as a double function. It's recharge and also prevent flooding downstream.
We have so typically my colleagues on the stormwater management side of things usually have to design their ponds or their what they call low impact development, like their infiltration basins to handle both quality and quantity, because we use 100-year design storm, and they need to make sure that after development there's no increase to that 100 or that it can handle the 100-year storm before there's an increase to the base flow of the receiving waters. Exactly for that reason, we have problems with flooding here too.
Also want to add to Ignatius that there are methodologies with regards to pollution risk assessment and source protection for groundwater sources that were in those days developed by CEPIS, which was a PAHO institution, in collaboration with the British Geological Survey. And those documents are available. And based on those methodology, we did also groundwater pollution risk assessments for Barbados. and I can make those documents available to you. I can ask you for further distribution, because that might be, especially for the groundwater islands, would be a good resource. Over.
Well, always thank you, Ton. That of course we try to be as best a repository for a lot of that information, so that they can move to as we make our exit from these fora, that we can pass the information on to the next group of people taking it on. So thank you for that offer. Uh, Also, what are there sort of conflicts that you may have where you may have the planning authorities, or you have found an area to be high risk and maybe permissions would be given, notwithstanding that you have identified some zones as being high risk or low or risk, whatever it is?
Yeah, they've got it it's set up so that there really isn't so each municipality, so that's in a given source protection area, has a designated risk management official, and that is the person that makes the decisions on whether or not a risk is significant enough to need a risk management plan. So it doesn't become a political decision. They're the final say as to whether or not it needs a risk management plan. They are trained to the standards of the province through the Ministry of the Environment. So really, we're putting faith in those individuals, which are professional engineers or geoscientists, that they are that they know what they're doing, basically. So there's not really any conflict that I've seen. It's usually deferring to the risk management official, and their decision is final. And I don't believe that there is an appeal mechanism. So if you as a homeowner is not happy with that decision, it's one of the few things here that you can't appeal.
Right.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. Any other questions or comments from the floor? I don't see any in the chat room. There being none, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us this afternoon, and I'd like to thank Chris immensely for giving us some of his time and also preparing for this. And as well, the Operators Without Borders and Valerie, who was somewhere in flight, or I think she was on a long trip. So I want to thank them for giving us the support. But I'm, I think I will note Ton's offer of some additional information that we can share with our colleagues. And we'd like to thank you for sharing this information with us. So
And you've got my contact. If there are any follow-up questions, let me know. And I'm always happy to chat. If there's another topic that you would like to discuss, let me know, and I'll figure out how to do the PowerPoint presentation a little better.
okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you. Yeah.
I'm Ignatius Jean, the Executive Director at the Caribbean Water and Sewage Association, signing off from our CAWASA Wednesday webinar. Until next week. See you again.
Next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you.